45 minutes from now anyway, but I will do my best. Anyone attended any of my workshops before? Just now. Came straight back in, thank you. So for those of you that don't know, so this is pretty boring, I'm really sorry, my name is Deb. I am a 57-year-old woman who I'm demisexual, so I like a connection. I don't give a fuck what you've got between your legs. I'll fuck it anyway if I like you. Well, not fuck it, depends. It's about connection for me. That said, I've been pretty happily promiscuous for most of my life, and I don't have any regrets about anything or anyone that I've done over the years. So it's just, I have also been a switch in the past, but I identify as submissive. I still argue I'm demi-submissive, so I'm not submissive to anyone or anything. I've been at a club where somebody said, get me a drink, and I get your own fucking drink, pretentious cunt. You don't owe me anything, I don't owe you anything. Just because I'm wearing white and I'm the sub, fuck off. It's earned, so I'm a big believer in that sort of thing. So I am submissive, I have switched, and I've been doing that since I was 17, and that's 41 years. It's quite a long time. And I've been poly and kink and alternative for all of that time in various ways. That said, I also had a monogamous marriage for part of that. Even though that person knew who I was, and I shared all of that, and I had 4 daughters in very quick succession. Realised what it was after, and I thought, I've got to stop doing that. And I have these amazing human beings as daughters as well. I have a rainbow family as well, which I'm very proud of. So we're talking about consent today. Anyone, I'm assuming everyone's here to learn a little bit about consent, or at least listen in some way, shape or form. So I'm going to say something shocking. I think consent is a heap of shit, and the way we teach it is a heap of shit. And I think it's one of the most brilliant, wonderful things that we can teach and learn about. So I think there's a real juxtaposition in the word consent. I do not think you can ever fully consent to anything because you cannot know the outcome. And I think that's really important that we realise that. A lot of people say, yeah, but you consent. I didn't consent, so I liked ultraviolence in my past, which is pretty extreme. So I've done some extreme things. I've been punched, thumped, knocked out. I've done some really crazy stuff over the years, and you go in and out of it, right? I didn't consent to that. So that story is, oh God. I met this person in a hotel room, because that's the sort of thing you do, purely for sex. Really not my thing anymore. Not sex, but just like meeting a random stranger in a hotel room. I had a coat on, a pair of high heels. High heels aren't my thing anymore. Fuck that. It does to me. I'm just not interested. And I turned up with a coat. And nothing else on underneath a pair of high heels. Went into this hotel and we've had lots of conversations about what could be used, what couldn't. It's great, out for a great time, pillowcase over my head. It's good. Lying down, doing all sorts of stuff. And the next thing I know, I've got this really strange pain inside my cunt. Yeah, it's not actually, vagina. We're talking proper walls here. That's what the vagina is. It isn't that bit on the outside. I know it's a shock to some people. It's the inside, right? And I feel this strange sort of like pulling and tugging, and the next thing I know, I'm like doubled over, and there is just blood flowing out of me. He put a balloon whisk inside me. I had a coil in. Now, coil wires should not wrap around anything, right? It's unusual. They shouldn't, and it really shouldn't have happened. Why would you put a balloon whisk inside somebody's cunt as well? And if you put a balloon whisk inside somebody's cunt, or anal sphincter, like go through the anal sphincter, go to anal canal, if somebody is slightly overweight as well, so bear this in mind, folds inside people are also full of fat. So you put a balloon whisk and you twist it, you're twisting someone's inside. For me, it caught, so I didn't consent, but now I will say, have you got a whisk in your place? So yeah, honestly, the strangest of things can happen. So I'm just going to refer to make sure that I've got a massive writing on this, and it's a really important writing to me. But I think we've got to be really careful, because consent is not a holy grail. That's what I always say. We think it is because I've got consent. You haven't. You haven't got the nuance. You haven't got the consequence. There's no way you've thought of everything. It's as good as it gets. The problem is then if we get retroactive withdrawal of consent and different things happening because we say that I didn't consent to that. And I didn't consent to that. The problem is you don't know what's going to happen consensually afterwards. I have my hips injected probably every 2 years, roughly. You have bursa on your hips. By hips, I mean around here. You also have bursa on your arse when you sit down, and you have them on your elbows. You have them in various places to help protect those bonier parts of your body. They're there, they're very functional. Do you know if you get punched enough while you're being fucked from behind, your bursa will split? Did anyone know that? So how can you consent to be punched fully and understand the consequence? My consequence is I have steroid injections every few years. Of course I don't tell people the full reason why when I'm at the doctor's. But the consequence is I pay 250 quid for 2 sets of injections because I'm not waiting on the fucking NHS. It costs me and it hurts. And I'm all of a sudden sleeping and I'm like, God, I'm really not sleeping well. My hips are fuck. Did I consent at the time? 100%. If I knew what I know now, and I don't know if I'd still consent because you have to live with the consequence and future you doesn't matter to you psychologically. You give a shit, you might be really happy you put that Coke in the fridge and it's cold and that was really considerate of you. But 20 years down the line, or 15 years, or 40 years down the line, anyone here under the age of 25? Right, so if you're going to be doing this till my age, 30 plus years, there are a lot of consequences that come with that. And we have to just be really careful. So I think that really matters. And what I'm saying to you isn't a set of rules that you have to do. It's a set of suggestions that you choose whether you take on or not. It is up to you. And that's the same with consent. There is a difference between boundaries and preferences. And I think we've also got to understand that consent changes over time. When you love someone more, you're maybe likely to give a bit more. When you are in a situation, you might be giving a bit more. But also, if that person has had some form of traumatic experience, and we go back to fight, flight, freeze, friend, fuck, flow, flop, fawn, fucking and fawning can be a response from trauma. So they'll give verbal consent, and I mean it. It's not what's good for them. We're not all fucking psychiatrists in that moment. How can we know? We can only take what someone says. So we're really responsible for what we say and how we say it, and we have to take responsibility for that. That's very important to me. Okay, so what have I said in my post? Choice and free will. They're very interesting, aren't they? Especially if we do love someone. Anyone here know their attachment pattern? Some of us do, some of us don't. Anyone, look, you don't have to admit to this. I don't, it's not about judgment, I don't care. But anyone here aware that they maybe have an anxious or an avoidant attachment pattern? Right, so a few people have said yes. We've got to be very careful because actually part of that can be that we say, oh no, I really want you to like me. Or it might be that we have what used to be called borderline, EUPD, or it might be that we have some kind of mental health response to trauma in our past that says, I'm going to do this because if I don't, you won't like me. That isn't consent. That's desperation and fear and terror about abandonment. They're not the same thing. However, when you're busy fucking someone or getting it on and you just think, oh, I just want to put my fist in your ass, we're not thinking about those things, which is why we need to discuss consent away from the bedroom. We need to not change consent in the middle of something sexual when lots and lots of chemicals are going on. And we're like, oh, can I do this to you right now? Yes. I had a client who was stealthed. Anyone know what stealthing is? Anybody not know? So stealthing is removal of a condom without consent in the middle of sex. In the UK and some states in America, that is now rape. It is illegal. Can I also point out that if you wear a cap and you are a vagina owner and you put a hole in it, that is also stealthing. It is considered rape. Or if you put a hole in a condom because you want to fall pregnant, same. So it's quite new laws, just so they're quite new to us. So be aware. The problem is she had written very clearly no unsafe sex, no unprotected sex. But in the middle of sex, she turned around and said, do whatever the fucking hell you want to do with me. Which I would argue a lot of submissives do, don't we? Anyone ever said that? Fucking just do what you want. Do you really mean it when they're going to break your thumb? Or break a rib? And believe me, these things do happen, and intentionally. No. However, when she went to the police, that overrode her written consent. So again, be really careful. I'm also going to say to you, who here practices BDSM? In any way, shape or form? Who is a receiver of BDSM? Who is a giver of BDSM? What the fuck is BDSM? That's another thing. Who does both? Okay, so again, we've got to be really careful about the law. The law and consent really matter here. Do you know the law and consent in the UK if you are practicing? Do you all know the law? You cannot consent to violence against you. Does everyone know that? Because, look, the likelihood of you being prosecuted is fucking small. But if you get some cunt of a police officer, and I love police officers, they've always got handcuffs, even if it's not to and functions.
Extendable functions, eh?
At least it's not a wisp. Right, so clearly I'm kidding a little bit here, but I really want the serious message to get through. We cannot consent to violence against you. Now the law states that it's more than a trifling or transient mark. A trifling or transient mark, if you give someone a good slap and that handprint is still on them, 15, 24 hours later, that is more than trifling or transient. Anyone here had a love fight? You've technically broken the law. No. Thank you. Perfect example. Right, so,
Not one you can see on it.
You should see my balls. I don't have any. Right, so it's really important to understand that a trifling or transient mark is where the law states in the Spanner case. So even though you think, but I have got consent, I can tell you now, I've had a client. By the way, if I mention my client, I have full express permission to share these stories. I don't share stories unless I've been given consent. And even then, I really have to think about that. So these are very old clients, 10, 15 years ago, very different situations. I make sure none of my clients are in the room who have said it and all sorts of different things. Because you really have to be careful, because that could be coercive consent. Oh yeah, Deb, you can tell my story. Is that consensual? Like, do they really understand? So this shit really matters. He had a text from somebody who said, please make me bleed, use a cane on me, rip me open, and then fuck me with the blood running down my arse. And he was like, hell yeah, I'm going for that. That sounds magic. Just what he wanted. They had a great night. Blood all over the sheets when they woke up. Had a great time. She wasn't there. He was like, where's she gone? Next thing he knows, 2 or 3 coppers at his door. Hello, sir. At least I knew he was kinky, eh? That's a joke. Get it? Hello, sir. Come on, keep calm. Hello, sir. We've had a report of sexual assault, sexual abuse, and rape. Basically, is what they were saying. And of course, the sheets are full of blood. Now, luckily, he kept every single text from this human being, and they were very sensible police officers who said there was consent gained. She then regretted it and felt quite strongly about it. Maybe she didn't really understand what she was asking for, because it's quite extreme. And on a first meet, I don't know you, no. We all need to go a bit slower. Have you noticed that? Just make sure. And actually, he was taken down. He went down voluntarily, but, he had a good hour and a half conversation. And that could have gone against him, because if they feel they've got enough for CPS, the prosecution service, it doesn't matter what either person says. It matters what the law says. We can talk morally about this stuff, we can talk ethically about this stuff, and we can talk legally about this stuff. They're 3 different things. And we need to understand the difference. Yeah, but she wanted it, he wanted it, they like it, this is all okay. No, it's not. The law supersedes all of that. So please be aware of what you're doing. And if you take photos and you keep them something like this, I'm off to America soon for cheerleading competition, right? I don't have any photos on my phone. Do you know why? When I go for American customs, do you know what American customs can do?
Open the phone and ask you to display.
They can require you to unlock your phone. They can then go through your phone, read your text messages, see your emails,
and your photos.
Photos, all works to the point where some people will purposefully lock down their phone, disable face recognition, fingerprints, and will actually text a loved one saying, if you do not get a call from me in 2 hours, call on it.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Or just have a separate phone for travel.
Now, I keep my phone, but I don't keep those sort of photos on my phone. And I don't keep them anywhere. Bet life. Sensible place to keep all those lovely photos that you think are quite horny with all that blood and everything else as well. Yeah, it's been in many a court case. Can we start to think, please, about what we're doing and the risks that we're taking? There's a NAMI award up tonight for Scene Ambassador, right? Is that an important NAMI? Yeah, actually, it's really important, actually. I fucking fight for your rights all the time. I know shit tons of people that do. I've won it before, don't give a shit whether I win it again. I'm not asking for you to vote for me, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you are all ambassadors for the scene. You're all advocates of your own okayness and how we spread and how we say. And if your desire in a moment takes over from someone else's consent or anything else as well, and we go too fast because of frenzy, then we're in trouble. We've got to be really careful. Okay, so your choice and feel really matters. Consent varies from relationship to relationship. Everybody has different ideas about consent, about what it means. Start with a conversation. Can I just ask you what consent means to you? Have you thought about it before? What are your thoughts on it? Do you understand the law? Do you understand the difference that there are ethics, morals, and laws? Have the conversation. We need to start with that. Most people don't. They say, what can I do to you? What are you going to do? Well, actually, what they often say is, what can I do to you and what are you going to let me do to you? What about what we both want? And this is where I would really go into Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. But I'll cover that one in a minute, where we've got a four-way. What do I want you to do to me? But also, do I want to do that to you or vice versa? Both come into it. It's really important. A lot of people think consent is about the bottom. Is it? Fuckers like. You have the right as the top to say, no, stop, I don't want to do that. You're not fucking dispenser. I really want you to do this to me. All Doms do, and if you loved me, you would. I think I call that manipulation. It's not consensual. But a lot of people think Doms and tops should just do what they want. No. Consent is a four-way process. What am I willing to do? What do I want you to do? What are we both okay with? All of those ways. It's really fucking important that we understand that. So, and consent doesn't get looked at often enough when we turn around and we have long-term relationships. How often do we then go back into this to understand what consent is? Because we change. Our needs change. I've had cancer. I was in the menopause 2 years before I had cancer. When I then had cancer, I had a shit ton of surgery. And my right boob, honestly, I made a joke walking here. I was with Jerry and I was like, oh, thank fuck, I've got a strong bra on because my nipple, but I can't feel this nipple. So if you were to put something on this nipple, and I'd be like, hang on, I'm just going to check it's still there. I don't have the right sort of feeling in the same way. And if you're there sucking away saying, she's really loving this, I'm there thinking, so I need broccoli. Oh, the other one. Right, so I'm being slightly facetious. And also, yeah. We've got to be aware, but if you're doing something horrific, like when 50 Shades of Grey came out, the sale of nipple clamps went up by 2,000% that month. What sort of clamps were you buying, people? That's what I'm interested in, because if they're alligator clips, we better pull them off, because you don't know. Oh, why is your nipple still in it? Know your shit. Learn, please learn your basic, I really mean this, please learn your basic anatomy, basic physiology, and understand. I've asked that, so I've got
buy your kit from Lamb.
Actually, I would argue that slightly, because when you buy your kit here, what you can do is have a conversation with the person that made it, and they will teach you. I asked quite a few months ago, there's somebody, I think they're downstairs or right there, they do crocheting. I've got an orange bottom, I love it, it's a crochet bottom. And I said, please could you make me a safety bottom? A life-size safety, I think it's only a small person's safety bottom, it certainly isn't my safety bottom, right? I said, could you make me a safety bottom? And she said, what do you mean? And I said, I would like a safety bottom that has green, orange, and red places on it. So when I'm talking about stuff, I can say to somebody, this is a green place to hit, this is an orange place to hit, this is a red place to hit, for varying reasons. And then even with that, what we need is, but on me, that's a red. So this area is a green for most people. For me, I've got to be really careful from here up, it becomes a red. Also, because all my lymph nodes are taken out. So my healing is completely different on my right side compared to my left. You need to find that out about me. Doesn't mean I can't take a fucking good beating and a caning and everything else as well. It just means we need to consider differently. Anyone here like the idea of choking, or like it's one of the most fancy things that most people do, a little bit of choking, or, you know, let's make them pass out, or let's make them black out. Maybe not pass out, a little bit of healthy choking. There is no such thing. Choking, breath play is the most dangerous edge play we can do. It is more dangerous than waterboarding. People don't get that. Now, if you don't get it, please read my writing on breath play, everything you need to know, because everything you need to know is in there. And if you don't know how to resuscitate, do not do breath play. That's your moral. I'm being really fucking strong here. Hey, do you know anyone here a first aid qualified? Yeah? And you like breath play because you put your hand up at the same time. Yeah? Yeah? Those two have got to go together. If you're not, or you don't know what you're doing, Poppy and I are about to do these specialist weekends. We're writing them at the moment, and they're going to be in everything you need to know about kink beginning to end, including mental, physical, physiological, first aid just for kink. We're doing this whole thing, and we're going to be doing resus that is meant for kink. We're going to be doing first aid that is just for kink, taking all of this stuff into account, because it's not being taught anywhere, and that's not funny. So we need to understand that if I'm going to consent, I want to say to you, if you want to trach me out, do you know how to resuscitate me? And the other thing, the most important question you can ask someone if you're about to play with them is, in your play, what have you done when it went wrong? What did you do? And if the person turns around and says to you, it's never gone wrong, I'm going to run. And it's all right if you haven't had experience. It's not about experience, it's about complacency. Something's always gone wrong a little bit. If I can look at my whisk story. I've got hundreds of stories. I've been doing this for a long time. But it's about how the person owns it. What we know is when people die, it's often because people don't act. They did stop breathing. What did you do? Well, I went for a walk to think about it. Because I was scared. She's fucking dead, you cunt. We could resuscitate her potentially. But if you do nothing, she's still dead. We've really got to think, and this was a she I'm thinking about. This was a case in Edinburgh quite a few years ago. However, they were also both pissed. Have a problem with that, but that's another story. So, Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. You can't really see it very well. I'm really sorry because we have some big posters of this. But again, like me as the kink shrink on FetLife, this is a writing. Look it up, consent. So what Betty Martin talks about is what you're doing, what they're doing, what we're receiving, and what we're giving. 4 aspects on that circle. And it goes to serve, allow, take, and accept. It's a great wheel. Look it up. Does it teach us everything we need to know about consent? No fucking way, especially in the kinky world. I have a real problem when our kink takes over morality. I'm a prude. Honestly, I'm a prude. I don't like watching that person with their cock or their cunt, whatever bits they've got out, in the middle of New York with a great big collar on, flashing with hundreds of people walking past them. Those public, they didn't consent. So I don't like it when we say, oh yeah, no, I did consent to that photograph. You go, no, motherfucker did. Really think about that. There was a really popular photo recently of this young human being, like in shops when they're flashing in like Walmart. It doesn't take a lot for a child to walk round. And if a child does walk round and sees you, you're on a sex offence register for 10 years. Please think about this sort of stuff. There was a young woman recently who was doing naked yoga on the side of a motorway, just off. Why did you crash your car, sir, and kill those 3 people? I don't know. There was this woman there, and she was like, we've got to think about this shit. So it's really important that we do have these conversations. One of my favourite, not maybe for the right reasons, is the Fry's consent picture. Does anyone know the Fry's consent picture? Some of you do, some of you don't. Has anyone heard of Fry's, the acronym for consent? So the Fry's consent, right? So it's an acronym. Why do I like it? Because it's fucking wonderful. So let's have a look at what it means. The F means freely given. Tell me what that means. Freely given consent. Not coerced. How do we know what coercion is or isn't for somebody? We can ask them. I am interested in finding out a little bit more about people. I think if they've got a very complex past, coercion might not come into it, but it might not be freely given because it's not coming from a healthy place. So coercion does come in. So what else covers freely given? Balance of power. Like, if I'm on my knees talking to somebody and we're discussing consent right now, I'm. We're already in a different headspace, aren't we? So it's interesting. I'm a lifestyle submissive. This shit means a lot to me. I actually like what is considered domestic violence. I want to send you where I'm going. I want you to look at. I like a lot of that stuff because I consent to it. But if we have discussions that contain an imbalance of power, then we're not going to have the best conversations. So the imbalance of power is really important. What else is important about freely given?
Has to be not under influence by their alcohol or drugs.
Right, so we mustn't be under the influence of something, medical or drugs. Tell me what you mean by medical or drugs.
It does get interesting if someone is on have mental health issues and they're on medication, because that just alters the way they think.
Not just mental health issues. A lot of drugs and tablets that we take alter our perceptions. What are you going to say?
Would you almost say the reverse then, that if they're off mental health medication that they should be on?
Correct, and I was going to cut up to, so yes, we'll come on to that one. I'll come on to that one. So when we're under the influence of something, can consent be freely given? Look, the cup of tea consent video is so fucking British, it's awesome. Anyone not seen it? Look it up, it's fucking funny. It's really good. Would you like a cup of tea? Yes, please, I'd love a cup of tea. Thank you. If they wanted a cup of tea last week, it doesn't mean they want a cup of tea this week. If somebody's passed out, you do not make the tea and pour it down their throat.
Sleep people do not want tea.
But some people just don't like tea. And also, it's also got that concept of, even if I make you a cup of tea, you still don't have to drink it. It's a great video. It's so short.
You wanted my tea last week.
I don't want it this week. I'm very cold. But if you are sending me your spunk in a condom tied up for me to put over my cereal, I might be into that. I might like it cold. I'm not. That's warm is always best, trust me. So
Not microwave.
It's an interesting glaze you have on your salad today, Deborah. Can I try some? No. Right, so freely given is also if you're off medication, if you are in withdrawal or you're having some kind of symptom or you're not maybe. Look, compos mentis is a really interesting phrase, isn't it? Do you have the capacity to consent? And that also takes into consent disabilities of different levels and understanding and comprehension. So again, we have to be careful about that.
Subspace as well.
Subspaces, so DOM space, any form of space. If we go into a reactive state that takes us to another place, that is an opportunity to do everything you've ever wanted to do to them. That's an opportunity to care for them. Put a blanket over them. I remember years ago I was in a club and this particular friend, and she was gone. She was gone. And I was watching the play because I do worry about her because she goes quite easily. And she's very much a fawner. She very much loves to please people. Yes, whatever you want will be fine. Whereas I know that's not true. Now that is her responsibility, actually. It's not always the other person's. And she was gone and he started doing some stuff. And I walked over and I said, I'm really sorry. Actually, I'm not. Do you have consent to do that? I didn't even go to DM. It was a private party. And he said, look, we're playing. We know it. No, I know. I can't tell you how many times I've played her. She's one of my best friends. She doesn't like that. She doesn't want it. She's not in a fit state to give any form of consent. I got the, who the fuck do you think you are? Don't interfere, you little whatever. And I was like, just your response is telling me a lot about you here. Because I think actually, what a lot of people could say, I'm really pleased that you've come over to us. It's really great that you care. We did discuss this. And I would still then say, please, could you stop right now? Look, we're not allowed to do this in clubs. I really understand that. This was a private party. If I really knew someone, or I go to DM, but even they might not act quickly enough. Like a lot of damage gets done by going away and having a conversation and coming back. I had a note written to me saying, help, what would you do if this was you? A very high up member of our community. It was a fucking high up member of the community. I was at a club with a friend. They had to help her. She couldn't walk down the stairs. They carried her down the stairs because she couldn't put one foot in front of the other. And then he was fucking her with her legs up around his neck. We're really worried about saying anything because she doesn't want to be seen as a troublemaker. And I don't think she could have consented if she doesn't really remember what happened. Now, my first immediate worries with no recollection or memory, trauma, drugs, drugging, there's a lot that comes into that. And this shit happens every day in our community, and yet we know better than anyone else because we're great communicators, right? So, freely given is also about mood and temperament on the day. If you're really stressed out, if you're not in a good place, look, if you have a complete power exchange relationship, I like consensual non-consent with my partners. That means, even if I'm asleep, or even if I'm in a bad mood, if your cock all of a sudden comes down my throat, that's okay. Or your cunt, whatever. That's okay by me. Unless I call an emotional red. So I have emotional safe words and physical safe words. I'm not in a good place. It doesn't mean this isn't going to happen. Can I just share with you how I am today? Anyone else here use emotional or other safe words? If you don't, please introduce them to your world. Sometimes they're for information, so they're more of an amber. Like, my safe word is silver, it's not red. I don't follow the green, amber, red. I use it for both. Silver, I need to tell you where I am, and then I'm going to give you the power to make that decision and take into consideration, because I like the power exchange more than I like the we're just playing or doing something. So emotional safe words are a really big thing, especially in today's world. They're a very simple thing to introduce into your dynamic, and I would recommend that we all do them. I would massively. So if you don't, so freely given means a lot of things. R stands for reversible. What does that mean?
Change your mind.
Change your mind. When? Anytime you want to. Even if the tip of anything is about to go into anybody else. I don't care if it's a strap-on, I don't care if it's a cough, I don't care if it's fingers, I don't care if it's a fist. If the person says, wait, no, you check. Look, no might not be a safe word. A lot of us play with the word no. Please stop, don't do it. Please don't hurt me. Please don't do this. And we carry on because we want that scenario. You have to agree that that's okay. But it's reversible at any one time. Who for? Who's it reversible for? Fucking everyone. It might be a circumstance. It might be that I have to think slightly different to some people. In that, I have a lot of clients on the scene. A lot. I would say over 90% of my client base is scene-based. Because they want to come to me because I won't judge them being a kinky weirdo like I am and say, well, that's the problem. That doesn't mean I'm not going to say what you're doing is always healthy. Actually, we might have a different conversation, but I come from a different place. I don't think it's particularly professional of me for you to see what I have for breakfast through my cunt. Just say it. So I'm not. So like if I'm naked, I don't think that's a good place for us professionally to be, and I don't want to see you naked. So if I'm in a party situation, one of my clients is there, I walk away and I walk out. The same as I would do if one of my daughters was here. I've got 2 daughters who are subs. Kinky. One's more kinky, one's more sub. She's got a daddy. They're also terribly proper getting married soon, and they just want a puppy. So do you know what I mean? Everyone's like, oh, and the puppy.
I was like, what type?
A cavapoo. So I've been here with my eldest, Darcy, for example. She came with me one Mother's Day. It was on a Sunday. Weird relationship. It's not. It's a fucking awesome relationship. And she wanted to stay for the after party. So my immediate response was, have a great time. I'm not coming. I don't often go to the after party anyway because I don't want to see certain people in certain situations, and they're certainly not going to see me in those situations. It is unprofessional. There is a difference. There's a difference between knowing I'm kinky and then seeing my cunt or my tits. There is a difference in that professional, ethical, and moral relationship. There is a difference. So I have to be careful. And in fact, interestingly, she was really well protected here because we talk about reversible and different things. What was interesting is she got her drink spiked, not here, but at the place before. Cosmic noticed that she wasn't okay. He phoned me, he put her in a cab at his cost, and he sent her home. And then checked up on her, and so did I. She went to sleep. She didn't want to get tested, but that was all checked, whatever. But I love the fact that I can rely on people I know and love to look after people I know and love. That's kind of awesome. So reversible is at any time, in any way, at any one point. Even if you have a full power exchange relationship, it's not recognised by the law. If you turn around and say, my John made me do it, you're not going to get very far as that as a form of defence. I stole that because I hurt that person, because I did that because. And thought exchange can take really extreme things, even like voting. You try telling someone you voted Tory last time and see how that. Politics are very interesting. That was a joke, right? We've got to be careful because you live with a responsibility. And if you think that you do something that goes against your morals or your values, really think about that. It's reversed at any time. It's not just about the physicality, it's about the power as well. You've got to look after yourselves as human beings. The I stands for informed. What does informed consent mean?
You know the outcome.
You know the outcome. Can you ever know the outcome? No, so that's a bit of a fuck up, isn't it? Can you be as informed as you can be? So what else does informed mean?
Understanding kind of the kink or the activity that you're doing in some depth.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, do you know how to do this? I mean, if that person was a whisk, do you know you shouldn't really put a whisk inside anybody, especially if there is fat internally or there is something that it could grab onto? Do you know that? No, I just thought I'd grab something, it'd be good. Can you use a wooden spoon from the kitchen? Yes. However, if that wooden spoon splits, it can get bacteria and it contains fluids. Do you even know how to clean your toys properly? Are your toys cleaned? Let me tell you now, I have a full and complete selection of toys. If you want to play with me, guess whose toys you use? Mine. Why?
Because I know the clean.
They're clean. They've got my fluids on, my shit, maybe even literally, my blood potentially, because we do bleed sometimes, even by accident. It's got my stuff on, and I know that it's clean. Whereas if you put that collar on me that somebody else has had with their sweat on and other things, I don't know my skin as well as I used to, especially after chemo. I react to different things, interestingly. I went through a window face first when I was in my early 20s, and I had 28 stitches in my face. My mouth was off from here to here, across here. You can still feel the fracture across my nose and my eye. And what's interesting is there's a drop here as well. I have some filler put in this side of my mouth. Now, I always look like I've been beaten up. It's quite cool. I quite like taking photos of that. But what's interesting is since I've had chemo, fuck me, I look like I've been beaten up. My skin is reacting completely differently. Maybe it's because it's on this side. And maybe it's the menopause. Maybe it's many things, but it's also about understanding. So informed doesn't just mean I know what you're going to do to me. It means I know how I'm going to respond to it. It's really important to say I've never done that before. I'm new to this. I don't know how I'm going to respond. I don't know how my body's going to respond. Please, can we go slow? I don't play with people unless there's a connection, which means I haven't played in quite a while. I really haven't. Could I take a fucking beating before at times? Yeah. Could I now? Probably not. Because our bodies change. So when we look at addiction, we look at tolerance of our chemicals. So if we have, this is our normal tolerance, and this is where we are. If we keep drinking, for alcohol, for example, boom, 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 eventually what happens is that balance stays up permanently, which means your body says, oh, you've already got this, you don't need me, so it drops. Then you have to drink more, drop, more, drop, more, drop. When you stop drinking, it takes months for this motherfucker to come back up. But if you then do, and then you go to drink that much, you're going to be very ill or you're going to die. Because you can't, your tolerance has changed. It's the same for BDSM and pain. Also, the fact that you've gone through something or things have changed means that you have to understand, informed to you and to the other person. Somebody said in the last workshop, you have to understand yourself, which you do. It's not about pleasing the other person. So informed is a lot more complex. Fry's also, the E stands for enthusiastic consent. What does that mean?
A very strong yes. Yes.
Yeah, I really want it. But what if we're falling at that stage? What if I think I want it because I know you want it for me? A lot of my sex drive and my submission is responsive. It is not, so my sex drive can be really high. However, it's responsive. If somebody stops wanting me, I tend to go, oh, okay. Less giving. I want you? Yeah, I'm not sure. They're not this week. Okay. And that's what keeps happening. So that, and I have to be really aware of that and say, by the way, we haven't, or we don't, or we did. So enthusiastic has a lot of aspects to it as to what it means. And we can be very vocal. I think we have to be very informed about enthusiasm and what it means. We also have to look at laws in different countries. I don't know if you know anyone here French. Ah, Interesting. Do you know the law on rape in France?
Oh, French Canada.
Oh, not the same. But, but French. So anyone here comes from France. What's interesting is if you don't fight back, even if you are a child, what? It's not necessarily considered rape. I know, that's really shocking. Look, they tried to change the law, and are they changing it? Yes, there are things, but it's been some very sticky, nasty situations. But they didn't fight back. People don't fight back. We freeze, we fawn, we flop, we do a lot of things. We don't necessarily fight back. If you feel something isn't quite right, it is better for you to say, something feels off. Be the nun in Madeline, something is not quite right. Can I just check it with you? Do you know what? I'm more likely to let you do 10 times the amount of stuff the next time if you ask me that question. Because what you've just done has been so considerate and caring. And look, it might have fucked up that evening slightly. Be careful about setting expectations. A lot of people do this. Oh my God, we're going to do this tomorrow. And then the dog dies. You're not going to do that tomorrow. Be careful about setting expectations. Enthusiasm needs to come from all sides. And it might not always be completely enthusiastically given, especially if you have a CNC consensual non-consent relationship. I'm really fucking tired. I don't care. I'm doing this to you. Okay then. Because you've got that, but that's agreed. It's different. So we've got to be very careful about enthusiastic consent. It's a definite yes. It's a definite yes. However, enthusiastic consent is also a definite no sometimes. Stop, get off me, don't do that. Is that okay to say? It fucking is. Is it okay to listen to if it's been agreed? However, how many of you have tested your safe words? So what do we mean by the word testing your safe words? What do you mean by that?
I've ensured that the person has remembered them and is able to use them in a scenario where they feel unsafe. And quite often I use the safe word of no and stop as safe words because I will respect them. And I've often only felt comfortable when I know that someone can say stop. Because I don't want to be in a scenario where I don't hear a stop and then they go too far and they upset themselves or upset the situation upsets them.
It just fucks up the relationship.
That makes me feel absolutely horrible.
It fucks both of us up, doesn't it?
I only feel comfortable knowing that they can say yes and they can say no. If they can only say yes and they can't say no, I don't feel comfortable.
Well, what's your no worth if all you say is yes? It's that classic sign, isn't it? If that's all we do, I'm curious to meet someone a few times to see if they're a pleaser. I might ask them to do something in my old switchy days. I might see if they'll do something like, give me this or give me that. And then I might say, look, okay, I asked you that. It's not a test. I don't want to set you up. I'm not a cunt. I really want to understand, were you comfortable doing that? Are you willing to say no to me? It's quite sexy if somebody asks this shit. Consent is sexy as fuck. I'm more likely to get on my knees in front of him because of what he just said. Not less. It's just the basics. But we don't understand that. So enthusiastic is quite interesting. The S stands for specific. What do we mean by specific? I've got to say away at a time. This is a workshop that takes days normally.
Knowing what it is you're consenting to.
Yeah.
So saying, can I fuck you? Okay, but what? Where? With what? And how does that mean?
And also maybe even for how long. I really understand. I get a lot of approaches from people who are 30 years younger than me. And they tell me what a great time they're going to give me because they're going to drill into me for 3 hours.
If hip problem, that becomes a problem.
Not just hip. I'm likely to dry up in the middle and get a thrush or something like this. Or you're going to give me cystitis. Or I don't come from penetration, mate. That's right. Yeah. Helen, you're fine on dry twigs.
All your hot stuff.
Oh, good one. But my point is I get that a lot from lots of young people. You could teach me loads. Please teach me. I don't want to. Not like that. But also, it's interesting when people are saying things like, yeah, but I could give you a really good time. How do you know that? You haven't asked me what a good time is for me. You have no idea what a good time is for me, but you assume that it's just all about penis and vagina, which is what a lot of people do when it comes to sex. Or what we do with kink is we say, you're going to have such a good time, the things I'm going to do to you. You mean the things I'm going to let you do to me, and we need to discuss them. What are they? Specific really matters. I remember years ago I saw this advert on FetLife that said, looking for men with penises. This is what this person said, this wasn't me. I want to give my partner a really good time. She won't know about it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tie her up and blindfold her and put headphones on her. She's going to be bent over the bed. And we're going to take turns and I want to see if she knows which one is me.
Without any form of a knowing.
She wouldn't know.
No. Great.
So sign up here for rape.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Absolutely. But 6 or 7, 8, 10, 12, like they're all saying yes please, yes please, yes please. And it often takes somebody weird like me to break the seal, saying, this isn't okay. And all of a sudden thousands of people, that's not okay, that's not okay. And I'm like, this isn't okay, why are we doing this? And it's like, wake up, the fantasy versus reality. So specific is very important. Is it a good idea in the middle of a session to add something new in?
No.
Why not?
Consent to begin with. But
There is
I
that.
suppose it depends on whether they have a shopping list of things you can do. And then say at any time you can add them, but that's been discussed and that's consent and that's that.
Yes.
To add something you've never spoken about, definitely not.
But I would argue, even if you have spoken about it previously, maybe 6 months ago, if you haven't discussed it for that scene, they could still agree to doing anal, but maybe don't have a good tummy at that time. You don't want to do it. So if it's not agreed before the play, it doesn't get added.
Although belching and farting usually isn't covered.
Okay, I'm going to be really graphic and honest then, right? Because that is my style. I definitely have the shits more than I ever did after chemo. You should really ask me if you want to do anal. Unless that's your thing, it isn't mine. And if you want me to lick it clean afterwards, it really isn't my thing. So we have to be careful, like asking, it's about timing, it's about everything else as well. But fucking hell, I'm already running out of time, this is crazy. But I think you've got to learn how to negotiate. The problem is negotiation is a skill. I've got a full writing on negotiation. Please read this stuff. I'm not saying mine's the best, I'm saying it will lead you to other things. What I do tend to do when I'm writing is I'll give you 4 or 5 others saying, this is really good. If you follow Mr. O on FetLife, he has a brilliant set of writings on negotiation, really similar. It's really important. And I think somebody wrote something about assent rather than consent, which is all about understanding where we are and what we're going for between us and understanding that that's the climb. I also think consent is a heap of shit when we turn around and it starts to ruin everything. If for every second I'm saying, can I just touch your hand? And this is really sexy. Can I just touch your wrist? Or can I just touch your elbow? Fucking hell, that's hardly fun. We need to get a good idea of what we're doing together and make some little within a reasonable hemisphere of assumptions. Because actually we are going to do these things and things go wrong and we can't always call that abuse. How many times has somebody with 2 holes, who's here, been fucked from behind quite viciously and all of a sudden had something in a hole they didn't expect?
Yeah.
Definitely happens. Now, that other person's appendage of whatever it is, even if it's a plastic one or a real one, could also potentially be broken. Banjos get snapped. There's lots of blood. Things happen because we don't mean to do these things. But there was no assault involved. There was no consent involved either. But the person never meant to do any of that. So we also have to understand that accidents happen, that things go wrong. And I've got another writing, bingo, I've got another writing on something that I call the clusterfuck scene, where we make assumptions and things go wrong. Somebody wrote to me a long time ago and said, this person has sexually assaulted me. And I said, okay. They then went on to tell me more, that I don't always ask for this stuff. I get a lot of inboxes like this. And they said, well, we were having a really great time. We consented to everything. I then went to the toilet. They said, leave the door open. And they wanted to watch me wipe my vagina, were her words. But it put me in a little space. We don't consent to sex when I'm in a little space. I came out. He didn't know I was in a little space. I couldn't tell him I was in a little space. Then we went on to do a lot more play and we fucked. So he raped me. Did he? Neither could communicate, neither knew. That to me is a clusterfuck. That's horrific for everybody involved. Because when she could tell him, he was devastated. And then she then went on to say, well, he raped me to a lot of people. And then a lot of people jump on that bandwagon. Did he? I think that's really dangerous in our world, where somebody can't say something. How responsible are we? Or do we have to say, listen, these are the things that will put me in a little space. You need to be aware. Please don't do them because it will get in the way. But she might not have known that. So I'll go back to that informed where it says you've got to know yourself in order to give consent. Quite a few months ago, I had someone come in a workshop and said, don't be one of those people that tells me I shouldn't fucking be doing any BDSM. And I was like, here we go. I'm a sub. Cool. Problem is, when I'm in subspace and I come around, I tend to punch the person in the face. I said, and I'm assuming that's without their consent. Yeah. I can't help it though, it's not my fault.
Go to therapy.
Get some help. Get some help. Or at least inform the person that that's what you're likely to do so they can take action. Maybe, or even tie your hands with permission and consent, and so it doesn't happen. Oh, you're another one of those fucking people. I'm like, no, you're just being a selfish cunt. That's the problem here. You want your rocks off in your way without the consideration of the other person at all. That now, like, you're assaulting them. There's a real difference in this about consent. Who's got a question about consent before we finish off? And I haven't covered half of what I want to cover because it's impossible to cover this in 45 minutes to an hour. Impossible. There's so much more to it. Anyone got a question or an aspect that isn't quite covered that they would like to ask before we get out for some fresh air? I'll come back to you.
I like getting really high before I have sex, but can I consent to that? Is there a way I can do that consensually?
Yeah, by absolutely telling the other person what you're doing, by being really clear about what your boundaries are. One of my fantasies, the only one I haven't done, believe me, is, I was saying this earlier actually, wasn't I? So one of my fantasies is completely drug me, film what's about to happen, and let me see it afterwards. The reason I don't consent to do it is because I don't know how I'm going to react to the level of drugs on my system afterwards, on the flashbacks and the PTSD that it could create. I would be really scared of playing with you as your top if you're completely off your face, because if I get something wrong, you can turn around and say you consented, but you cannot consent because you're high. So unless you make it 100% clear, this is what I like to do and this is what it looks like, and this is all the parameters, you could agree to film it so at least you know, and you can, it doesn't make any difference in court though. That's the problem if either of you get caught doing any of that. So you've got to be very careful. And it's going to take a very specific form of top who will want to play with you under those circumstances. So it's about finding somebody who understands drugs, who understands what drugs you're taking and what high looks like and then what not okay looks like. Do you need, if I tie you up for hours and you've taken a shit ton of MDMA and I'm not giving you enough water, I'm actually starting to damage you, potentially. Like if you're on ecstasy of any kind. Or it might be that you have a certain come down and actually you're off the high, but I haven't realised, and now I'm doing something when you're not high anymore. There's a lot of conditions that come with that. So for me, what that would be shit tons of discussion. And then the other person has to know. A lot of people like to do things when they're off their face because we almost don't want to consent when we're not. Make me do this, Daddy. At least I'm not to blame. I'm not that person. And I've got a writing on the hypothesis of moral shame as a problem. So moral shame is when soldiers, army, even doctors who are connected. I've got a little bit of a hypothesis. I've been offered a PhD on two things, and this is one of them. That it's a basis for retroactive withdrawal of consent. Because, we do the gangbang with 30 people. Oh, just me? Right, so we do the gangbang with 30 people, and then we go, fuck, I'm a whore, I'm a slut. And all my moral stuff starts to get in the way. So the same as when a soldier has to shoot somebody or kill somebody, that's such a moral injury because we've always been told not to. There are also, interestingly, a lot of male tops who cannot hit a woman to a certain extent because they've been taught all of their lives that men don't hit women. We've got that very gender-based rule and law and or their partner, and you don't do this stuff and you mustn't. But what if I like a slap across the face? And it's the same with drugs as well. So I would have really important conversations with the person that you're about to play with, and I wouldn't do it lightly. Because the possibility of going on for you as well as them afterwards is the danger here. Does that make sense? Yeah. You were going to ask as well before we finish.
I just wanted you to say a bit more about fawning. I like to feel that a top is happy hurting me. But to make that work, I also want that top to watch me. Well, yes, I do, but to watch me and keep checking, especially if it's the first time or the second time. So it's not, to not just look at me and read my body language, but also to check with words. Are you enjoying this? Is it
I-
good?
Yeah, I think body language is not a safe way to assume consent. Look, there are lots of things. We can look at skin modification, we can look at sweating, we look at skin colour change, we can look at body language. But however, if someone is in a trauma response or somebody's in subspace or somebody's having a flush or something, those things aren't very reliable. We need to be checking in. So the person needs to be compensated so we can check in. And I think that's stuff we need to agree up front that says, I will check, this is how I'll check. We need extras as well. So like, oh, actually, in the boot of my car, Jerry, I've got a bouncy ball for you, and I've got a collar for Dave and a few other things I've got. But, you know, like, that is connected. So, like, for example, if you're in a really dark space, if the person isn't okay, bouncy ball that lights up, something that makes sound when you drop it, like, can really show us some stuff if we can't communicate it. Because if the person's gone or in a different way, can I check in? Can you use words? Are you verbal? Are you somebody that can even say those things at that time? Is all stuff that needs discussion. It's sexy as fuck to have these discussions, but a lot of us don't want to because we just get led by our hormones in that moment. So we don't do it, which is why it's a good idea to try and do it a little bit before. Not continuously. Fucking I see a lot of people as couples or thruples or people who want to open up or experiment who turn, oh, I've discussed it and read 30 books. Fucking do it. Because actually, if you don't do it, you don't understand the responses you're going to have from it either. And knowing intellectually what's going to happen is not the same as having a visceral response.
I realize this is probably like a workshop question, but like in a very small nutshell, what should we do when we say like find that there's consent violations happen and we intervene and say, oh, I think there's a consent violation happening here. Like, what are the next steps that we should do?
If you're in a space where someone like here, you need to go to a DM, preferably. If you see a consent violation, we've also got to be very careful because it's an interesting one, even as a registered therapist or a licensed therapist in America. By the way, therapists in the UK do not have to be licensed or registered. It's a heap of shit, right? Anyone can call themselves a therapist, so check. It's very different. So if I say to see, oh my God, you were raped, that could be such a shock to that person that I've just caused a heap ton of shit. I've gone too fast. We need conversations. What was that like for you? What actually happened? And then we still got to be careful because if we make the person tell the story, we're potentially re-traumatizing them as well. Saying stuff isn't always a good idea. If you see something that you are uncomfortable with or someone shares something that you're uncomfortable with, there is no moral obligation or legal obligation to do anything unless it's terrorism or an act of money laundering in the UK and in the States. There is no legal obligation to report a crime unless it's one of those. So again, that's quite interesting. Even again, not morally or legally required to report it. You will not get in trouble for not reporting it. So, like, if you take, like, the Boston Marathon bombings, was it the Boston Marathon?
Yeah.
There were 3 university lads who knew one of the lads. They recognised him on TV. They didn't do anything about it. They all ended up with jail sentences. Whereas if they'd seen child abuse, there's no legal requirement. I have a moral requirement as a therapist, but I have to be really careful about that one. Because if somebody reports, it's be the worst thing sometimes to go boom and blow it up. It could actually make it all horrifically worse. That's one I always take to supervision, and I really check on that one. Again, it's quite complex. And believe me, I have been in that situation before, so you've got to be very careful. And you can also report stuff. I've been to social services. I'm about to finish. You can go to social services and report something. I did. I had a child who was backhanded with a fist across the sofa, broke her cheekbone, and everything else as well. What do social services do? Naughty daddy, don't do that again. That was it. So we can actually open up a can of worms that doesn't always work. So you've got to be very careful. There's different expectations of you morally, ethically, emotionally, and legally. You've got to do what you're comfortable with, but you've also got to find out what the other person's comfortable with. Some people just don't want anything done. I'm a big believer on the scene because we can't do a lot of legal stuff. If you genuinely know, there's a real difference between knowing and listening and hearing what you think has happened. If you genuinely know and you've seen something, we talk. We'll talk about you and people will find out and it will blow up. The Voice is blowing up. San Francisco on, I don't know if any of you are FetLife. There's been more than one of him. I knew it was going to blow up. I've had his victims in my therapy room for the last 3 months. It's not my job to blow it up because I have to deal with his victims. That's my responsibility in that moment. And as soon as it blows up, I'm going to fucking say something, and it is now. And I've said something. I've added my voice. you've got to be very careful. What you've got to find out is what the other person wants. Because again, if they had a consent violation, you could be violating their consent by taking it somewhere else. Some people don't want it. That's how some people deal with it. So I think you've really got to find out what the other person wants. And also, that's telling you something about the other person. I know who I'd avoid. I've got to stop because we've got
Sorry.
time.
We would normally say to people, if you want to take a selfie in front of the clear on consent